Could a team forfeit a monster win because their fans stormed the court? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. On today's show, we'll discuss some comments from Greg Byrne, Alabama athletic director, with some interesting takes on how to combat storming the court and storming the field. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right. Wanted to get into this. I saw these comments come out a couple of days ago, and there was a debate going on around field and court storming in college athletics. And Alabama AD Greg Byrne, he suggested his fix to the issue. Of course, conferences such as the SEC fine teams whose fans rush the playing surface after an upset victory. It continues to happen in both football and basketball. Most recently, Vanderbilt, they received a $500,000 fine from the SEC storming the court after their upset win over Kentucky and Nashville. But Greg Byrne is calling for the forfeit of the game if the fans leave the stands for the field to the court. And he said that could be the solution. Greg Byrne telling ESPN, quote, "I think from a safety standpoint, keeping people off the fields and courts is a good thing for everybody involved. If we said that the home team, if they storm the field or the court, they're going to lose the game right then and there, that will stop it." This isn't the first time that Greg Byrne suggested forfeiting as an idea to stop court storming. He did so previously last year when Duke star Kyle Filipowski appeared to get hurt as Wake Forest fans came down from the stands. Byrne did note it's not necessarily a majority view. He said he's open to other ideas that come up in the conversation. Yeah. Look, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Because here's the thing. The players and the coaches put everything they have into winning a game. They pull off a monster upset victory. But because the fans ran on the field after the game, you're going to then take that W away from the team. I think it's absolutely absurd, stupid. And I bring you back to the question, what's the biggest problem with fans rushing the court and rushing the field? I get there's a safety issue, but you know how many times this happens every year? I mean, at least a dozen times every year across football and basketball. And yet, I think we can count on one hand the number of injuries that have happened. It's been a serious injury. I mean, the reality is if you're at a basketball game and you don't want to get hurt, don't run on the court. Same thing with a football game. You could stay in the stands. Nobody's forcing you to run out there. And if you're sitting front row and people are rushing past you, just kind of move out of the way or whatever. But again, this could be policed more by more security, right? When, 100,000 fans in an SEC stadium rush on the field, and you only got about 20, 30 security guys standing on the field, they can't do much. But in a basketball arena, about 20, 30 security guards can make a pretty good impact in keeping people back. There's ways to combat it. I just don't understand, we always talk about this as one of the worst things ever. Just terrible fans running on the field. I do think we do it too much, right? If you're Vanderbilt and you beat number one Alabama, absolutely go rush the field, do your thing. But a few years ago, LSU beat Ole Miss and they rushed the field. That's your rival that you beat up on all the time. That's one you should expect. We've seen it with some other stadiums, a team that's ranked 11th. I'm sorry, you don't run on the court. It's got to be a monstrous win. You were, 30-point underdogs and you pulled off the upset. That's where you go rush the court or rush the field. So I think that's, maybe jump the shark a little bit. But on the flip side, this old stodgy, I think Greg Sankey does it too, the SEC commissioner. I mean, it's one of the worst things that could happen. We're we gotta protect the safety of this and that. I get it, but also it's who's really getting hurt here? I mean, it's more the teams that are pissed that they lost, or got upset on their home court, and then we got hit. These fans were running into us. Shut up. But back to the story here on Greg Byrne. He said, quote, I think from a safety standpoint, keeping people off the fields and courts is a good thing for everybody involved. If we said that the home team, if they storm the field or storm the court, they're going to lose the game right then and there, that would stop it. He said, I'm not overly optimistic and understand it's not a popular opinion. I'll get criticized for it, but that's okay. I do believe in it. If somebody come up with something that's a better idea that does not include that, I'm all for it. I'm not saying it's the only possible way. I'm convinced in my own simple mind that would be something that would stop it. I've had several people say, like, can you imagine, like, think of it this way, like Auburn upset Alabama this past weekend on their home court. But let's say Alabama had won the game, right? Their fans are going to run out there. But if they know if they run out there, they're going to forfeit the win, wouldn't every Auburn fan in the building rush the court to make it be forfeited? Like, you know, and maybe you could say, oh, they're wearing Auburn colors. Well, maybe they wear neutral colors next time. Who's to say if you're an Auburn or Alabama fan? Like, if you're just wearing a black jacket, like, this is where it gets very absurd. Greg Byrne said instead of rushing the playing surface, fans should instead have a good time in the stands. He also suggested letting the players leave before allowing those in attendance to celebrate on the field or the court. Again, pointing to safety. He said, let's celebrate up in the stands. Let's have a great environment. I mean, again, I think this is a little, Pollyanna, but like, and mostly it's the students, right? Like the student sections are usually the first ones to go, we want to do it. Why? Because we think it's cool. People have done it in the past. It's a monster win. Let's all go run on the field, the court, or whatever. Greg Sankey did come out and said, look, I think that's a tough proposition, forfeiting a win. He said, I do think there's more than Greg Byrne in this league who feel that way, though. Bruce Pearl came out and he said, look, I would hate to see that the efforts of the student athletes could somehow be taken away because of decisions by a couple of participants court storming. He said, I love the passion of court storming in college basketball. It's all about the students in these incredible environments. I do think there's a better way of doing it, though. Pearl said that there could be ways to maybe you cordon off the visiting team or you give them time to get off the floor immediately before being trampled on. He said, look, as soon as the game is over, we shake hands with our opponent at Auburn. We circle up in a corner of the court. And a lot of times our guys will kind of walk around the edges of the court, both at home and on the road, and high-five our fans and wave to them and thank them for the support. So, again, there can be some alternatives here, but I just think taking away the win is the dumbest alternative that we can offer here. Now, of course, in football, we've seen the massive football field storming, and Vanderbilt, they've been tabbed for 3 cases here in this past year. $100,000 for a football field storm in October, $750,000 for 2 men's basketball court stormings in January. And so Vanderbilt adopted a new policy that allows post-game celebrations on the court, but only after a 1-minute delay at the end of the game. First-year head basketball coach Mark Byington said, if we're fortunate enough to win, we need a new way to celebrate. He said this in a video announcement that was sent to students just about a week ago. The school said their new approach for men's and women's basketball games, if they pull off a massive upset, would be to let the fans enjoy a big win while giving players, coaches, and officials time to safely leave the court. It also could reduce the chance of additional SEC fines. Vanderbilt's new policy took effect before they defeated unranked Texas on Saturday, and the fans did not storm the court. Well, why would they? Texas was not ranked. But the Vanderbilt Hustler school newspaper, one of their writers said, the school's basically legalizing the court storming. He said, if the students aren't willing to wait that minute, then they're not real fans of the program, because I think that to cost the school $500,000 to storm the court immediately versus waiting that minute is a problem. Again, there's a problem with this. Like, the minute the buzzer goes off, bam, and you pull off that massive upset, you want to rush the court and go enjoy it. You're going to go, okay, guys, we got 60 seconds. Everybody watch your clocks. We got to wait till the team we just beat takes their sad asses off the court. Like, we all got to wait. Like, again, none of this makes any sense. None of this is, and it gets, like, Vanderbilt can get away with it. They're all smart kids and they don't pull off a lot of massive wins. So I guess they're easier to adhere to this, but try doing this with a bunch of drunk Tennessee fans when they beat Alabama at Neyland. Like, I go, guys, okay, got 60 seconds, put on the clock. They're going to put on the Jumbotron, go, we must wait a full minute for all the student athletes to exit the field. Like, again, I just think all this is a little silly. Greg Sankey, by the way, said internal discussions on how to best handle storming the court or storming the field are ongoing, and any expectation of a home court storm needs to stop. He said, our players deserve to be respected, both the home and visiting teams. They deserve to be allowed to congratulate each other, say hello to friends, exit the field. That's the basis, and do that uninterrupted without being insulted directly in their face by approaching fans whose motives they don't know or understand, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, look, it's pretty interesting. Brandon Allen, Director of Research at the National Center for Spectator Sports Safety and Security, ESPN caught up with him, and he said Vanderbilt established this new policy. He doesn't think spectators are inclined to heed the request to remain in their seats. He said, look, can the crowd come and celebrate with the players after the fact? I would like to say yes, but in order to do that, I think there needs to be a cultural change and communication. Allen even advocates for a 4 or 5 minute delay before fans can come onto the court or onto the field. I think here's the other thing. Nobody's being invited onto the court or the field. It's an emotional reaction. We just pulled off a massive freaking upset. We all want to get on the court or field and celebrate. Like, having to wait any stretch of time, nobody's going to put up with that. Nobody has the patience for that. He went on to say measures to hold individual stormers accountable could be worthwhile rather than penalizing the teams. He said, look, it's not the teams or the players' fault, right? They can't control fans from storming the court. He said there isn't efficacy in a zero tolerance policy, like banning somebody who stormed the court from buying tickets in the future or arresting them. He said it would take away from the atmosphere, require more staff, lead to more legal ramifications. He said, from a spectator's point of view, I don't know of any universities doing anything to deter it. So, again, this will be fascinating to see where this evolves into. I couldn't believe when I saw Greg Byrne saying, yeah, I mean, let's force that team to forfeit the win. Like, what? Because their fans stormed the court? Again, maybe if somebody gets seriously hurt, right? Like, if students suddenly rush the court after a big win and like go and punch the opposing players in the faces, then yeah, obviously we got issues and we got to cut this thing out. Remember, Caitlin Clark got hit when she was at Iowa and it was a big to-do and all this. But like I said, you can count on one hand the altercations or injuries that have happened. It's been few and far between. Most people have done it respectively, and it's an emotional release to go, hey, we won a massive game and we're celebrating it. So, but I know it'll continue to be a topic of conversation. Hopefully we can ask Greg Sankey more on this when we get to SEC Media Days in the summer, but fascinating to see what other alternatives could be featured here. Again, maybe it's putting videos up and just, the players and the coaches saying, guys, if we pull off this massive upset, please don't rush the field. But then again, are you jinxing it? If you're like only up 4 and then you run that video and everybody's like, oh, now you just jinxed it, we're not going to pull off the upset. I don't know. But just fascinating story that will continue. But don't put Greg Byrne in charge. We're not forfeiting wins for fans storming the court or storming the field. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we got some playoff rumbling on expansion. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports. We'll get to that here in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys, this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Well, now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who is matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who is backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress. And you get the most money back, guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. It is Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now. Go check them out at turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. All right, rolling along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. Hey, the SEC and Big Ten are reportedly leading a push for another round of college football playoff expansion. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports wrote a big piece yesterday on this issue. And basically, the SEC and Big Ten athletic directors are set to meet this week in New Orleans. And if they leave this meeting aligned, the conference leaders will push for major changes at the college football management committee coming up the end of this month in Dallas. His report dives into potential 14 and 16 team college football playoff models. In both models, the SEC and Big Ten would get 4 automatic qualifiers each. The ACC and Big 12 would get 2 teams each. The top group of 5 team would also still be included. It comes down to whether there would be 1 or 3 at-large spots. Notre Dame would reportedly receive a guaranteed bid if they finish in the top 14. So, look, all eyes are on 2026 for playoff expansion. That's when the new ESPN contract comes into play. And the 14 or 16 team model, 4 automatic qualifiers to each the Big Ten, the SEC, and like we said, so on and so forth. Now, our buddy Graham Coffey, who covers Georgia, we've had him on several times in the past. He tweeted this out, and I really thought it was interesting. He said, look, the SEC should not agree to a world where the Big Ten has the same auto bids as the Southeastern Conference. He said, nothing in the historical data says that the leagues are equal in CFP or elimination game type scenarios. So the SEC has way more programs recruiting at a CFP level as well. That's the thing. Like, go look at all the top recruiting classes the last couple of years, top 10, top 15, whatever. It's dominated by SEC schools more than Big Ten schools. Go look at the transfer portal. Again, it's the SEC dominating the transfer portal. The most talent lives here. And yeah, look, the Big Ten has won back-to-back national championships. Michigan 2 years ago, and then they fell off a cliff, and Ohio State won it this year. Got a little lucky, right? But we'll see if they drop off a cliff with all they lose. But like, the SEC still is the preeminent conference, and I kind of agree with him here. Like, who says the SEC should be getting, we get 4 and the Big Ten gets 4? Why does the Big Ten get 4? Like, they were pretty damn top heavy, right? Like, this year, yeah, Penn State got in, and okay, they were okay, but Indiana got exposed, man. They didn't play anybody all year. They get in the playoff and they get their ass handed to them. So, is that equal to the SEC's 4th best team? Like, is that really where we should draw the line? Like, no, I think if we're going to go to a 14 or 16 team playoff, there should be some years where the SEC has a chance to get 5 teams in if they deserve it, right? If they have those quality teams with a ton of great quality wins and a great resume. I'm not a fan of the automatic thing. It's like kind of like desperation. It's like, we're afraid there's going to be years where we don't get 4 in, so let's put a rule in here where we automatically get 4 every year. No, you're the big bad SEC. Stand strong. Say, even in bad down years, which some people said the SEC was down last year, that they get 4 teams in, like, you're going to get 4 in. I don't understand. I don't think there will be years where the SEC doesn't get 4 teams in a 14 or 16 team playoff, unless there's just a lot of parity and the league beat up on each other and you got a bunch of 3-loss teams all sitting at the top. Graham went on to say, he said, the Big Ten is smart to try and cash in on the 1-year sample size, but it's smoke and mirrors. Penn State, here's his argument. Penn State never beat a top 16 Sagarin team. Indiana's performance against the good teams it played is a damning statement on how poor the bottom half of the Big Ten was and is. So, again, really, really interesting piece from Ross Dellinger over at Yahoo. He goes on to say, conference playoff expansion, like we said, could mean 4 SEC teams make the field automatically every year. And so it's no secret other conferences consider it unfair that the SEC plays just 8 conference games while the Big Ten plays 9. Well, according to Dellinger, the SEC could make that move. This is Dellinger reports the SEC and ESPN could soon reach an agreement on a revenue split share for the 9th SEC conference game. Remember, we told you guys that was the big thing. They didn't want to agree to, the SEC didn't want to agree to a 9th conference game if they're not making money for it. Like, they want, the revenue for a everybody playing an extra game, because what does it mean? It means an extra win for half the league, but it means an extra loss for half the league. And so, if you're going to take on an extra loss for a bunch of your teams, then you want to have that guarantee that, hey, we have 4 automatic bids. But SEC teams could be looking at Big Ten opponents, adding Big Ten opponents to their schedule as well. This was the other part of it. So the SEC could go to a 9-game conference schedule, and then one of your non-conference games would be against a Big Ten team. So it would be like, like kind of we have in basketball, or had basketball for years, where it was the SEC Big 12 Challenge. This would be an SEC Big 10 Challenge, basically, in college football, where everybody would take part. And according to Dellinger, those annual SEC Big 10 games will be sold in their own separate TV package. So, ESPN, hey, you got the rights to all the conference games, great. But we're going to sign this deal between the SEC and the Big 10 to play each other. And then we're going to take those games and we're going to sell them to another network, whether it be Fox or CBS. The CBS will be the funniest, because the CBS got the rights to the Big 10 last year, gave up the SEC after so many years. Could you imagine hearing the SEC on CBS theme, and it's like they're doing like a triple header of SEC versus Big Ten teams back to back to back. You could get Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson back on the call of SEC games again. But Ross Dellinger was on with Paul Feinbaum's show on Monday, and he said some SEC programs would be hesitant to remove other non-conference games played annually, right? I mean, you've got Kentucky likes playing Louisville, and South Carolina likes playing Clemson. I mean, you would probably have to give some of those up, because you'd be making your schedule super brutal. Like if you're South Carolina, can you imagine you get, a Big Ten crossover game with Penn State, and oh, by the way, now we're playing 9 SEC games, and you're still going to play Clemson every year? I mean, it's making the road very, very difficult for yourself. But again, a 9th SEC conference game would then set in motion a scheduling agreement with the Big Ten, which itself already plays 9 league games, and the agreement would pit SEC and Big Ten teams against one another in annual games to be sold as a separate TV package. So again, it's all about money. All this is about money. It's not about what's best for the sport. Yeah, man, there was just too much changing too quickly here. And one other part of this, and Dellinger has this towards the end of his article, he says the 4th step in all of this would be remake conference championship weekend. He said, under the models being discussed, each power conference would need to establish the way in which they qualify their teams for the automatic berths. In either multi-auto qualifier playoff proposal, conference championship games would likely become much less valuable, and a reimagined championship weekend would feature conference play-in games for the automatic berths. So these discussions are very preliminary, but they're happening at the highest levels of conference leadership. Could the SEC and Big Ten, if guaranteed 4 spots, pit their 3rd best team against the 6th and their 4th best team against the 5th in on-campus play-in games to get into the playoff? Would they advance their top 2 seeds automatically into the playoff, or would they still play an SEC title game? It's fascinating. It's fun to envision it, but it's also, in my opinion, a little ridiculous and over the top. Do we need all this? Like, it's one thing to make the playoff, and okay, you're going to say 4 automatic qualifiers, fine. But on conference championship weekend, where we're going to have South Carolina go play at Ole Miss for a chance to make the playoff, like, I feel like at that point we should just look, no, resumes matter. Let's just look, whoever you beat this year, do you have the best resume? You deserve to get in. That's the whole reason why you have a college football playoff committee. So it's ridiculous, but letting you guys know all this stuff is happening. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Before we wrap up here, I do want to get to a tidbit of news. If you missed this on the SEC hoops front, oh, by the way, Joe Lunardi put out his latest bracketology yesterday, and not much change. He's still got Auburn, Florida, and Alabama all as 1 seeds. He's got Texas A&M and Tennessee as 2 seeds. He's got Kentucky in as a 3 seed. And in his last 4 buys on the bubble, he's got Texas and Vanderbilt in that mix. Last 4 in, he's got Arkansas. And in his first 4 out, he has Georgia in that category now. But that's 13 bids from the SEC. Again, that would be a record. And his note on Auburn, he has here, he says, Auburn has at least a 2-loss margin as the number 1 overall seed, meaning Auburn can lose 2 more games, according to his metrics, and still be the number 1 overall seed in the entire tournament. So Bruce Pearl working with house money now. I mean, it's like they still got to finish strong, but pretty interesting stuff there that Auburn has been so damn impressive. And the win over Alabama this past weekend in Coleman Coliseum was a huge resume, cherry on the top, but pretty crazy to think this could be, we debated yesterday, the best Auburn team ever. Still got to go prove it, make a run in the tournament, but they have been very impressive. All right, one of the other tidbits came out yesterday. LSU basketball not expected to make a head coaching change this season with Matt McMahon. According to On3 Sports, LSU is expected to retain McMahon following the end of the season. LSU is currently 13-12 overall, just 2-10 in the SEC. They did beat Oklahoma to snap a 7-game losing streak, but they report that LSU plans to increase their focus on building the NIL budget for their basketball program. Tigers are reportedly among the lowest spenders in the SEC, and they think the results are because of that. According to Scott Rabelais of The Advocate, Matt McMahon says he has always been appreciative of the support he received at LSU. Remember, he came in at a tough time when Will Wade was in trouble and FBI wiretaps and all that. They were losing scholarships, all this stuff. And he signed a multi-year deal and said, look, this could be a multi-year thing that we got to do here. But McMahon said, I've always appreciated the support we've had here, excited about our class, our recruiting class coming in, realize how important the transfer portal is now. The issue becomes here is when we talk about NIL payments, it's not an infinite amount of money. Like, it's a finite amount of money. And you've got your money coming in from the collectives that you could pay student athletes. And now you got the revenue sharing aspect, which is opening up very soon. And schools will be able to spend that money how they see fit. Now, the interesting part, because I saw some people saying, well, a program like LSU, they should have money to play for their men's college basketball players, right? Like, why are they struggling there? It's because LSU has been having to move that money around a lot. They've just, this past offseason, refocused a lot of that money to the football program, right? That's how LSU and Brian Kelly currently have the number 1 portal class, because they were able to buy a bunch of transfers and, again, using the system how see fit. But they've also had to put a ton of money towards the 3 programs that have won national championships here these last couple of years at LSU. Just 2 years ago, Jay Johnson won the national championship at baseball. So guess what you had to do? Allocate a huge pot of money for Jay Johnson to go buy transfers and recruits or whatever to build his roster. Paul Skeens was a big guy that they were able to get in from Air Force. Paul Skeens come just because he thought LSU was a good school? Sure. Probably got a little bit of money to come from LSU's collective as well. The other one, Kim Mulkey at LSU, just a year and a half ago, won the national championship at LSU. Kim Mulkey's fiery. You think she's coming into the office saying, nah, you know what, give Matt McMahon some of that money. He really needs to build his roster. No, she's going, give me top dollar so I can continue to get the top women's recruits in here and compete with Dawn Staley over at South Carolina and Coach Schaefer over at Texas and all these other people she's going up against. She's not giving up money. The other championship program that LSU just had in the last year was gymnastics. And yes, Livy Dunn does a great job making NIL money herself, but her teammates who kick ass, they want money as well. So again, when you have all these other programs all putting a hand in the cookie jar, somebody's going to get left out. And in this scenario, it was LSU men's basketball and Matt McMahon. They got left out. So now LSU saying, well, we're going to allocate some of that money there. Well, then who, on the backside, is somebody else going to get left in the dark? Does LSU baseball have to give back a little bit of their money? Hey, we can't spend as much this year. Does gymnastics say, hey, we got to give a little bit back. We can't spend as much. Kim Mulkey, yeah, you be the one to go tell Kim Mulkey, we're going to take some money out of your spending account because we need to allocate it elsewhere. Like, this is where it becomes a problem. And I'm just using LSU an example, but this applies to all SEC schools, is there's only a specific pot. And everybody just kind of assumed this would, a school like Kentucky, oh, they're so good at basketball, they should just put all their resources and funding into buying basketball players. Well, that sounds great, but there's plenty of other athletics on campus. And look at Mark Stoops in the football program. They're sitting there going, I got to rebuild this entire roster. We're losing guys to the portal. We can't pay to keep them. I need more money. And it's just going to be an interesting trend we'll see all across college football, particularly in the SEC, with the haves and have-nots. There are schools that have a lot of money. How are they allocating that money, and to what sports are they allocating it to keep those kids coming in? So anyway, today was a little bit of a different version of the show. A lot of opinion injected into today's show, but just wanted to hit on all of those different topics that we had for you. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. Does a good job covering the entire sport of college football. I'm Chris Gordy. It's been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.